Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Artist Talk. Today, I am joined by Nicholas Warndorf, whose exhibition Cosmology is up currently in 934 Gallery and is available to view through November 14th. You can make an appointment to come view the exhibition at 934 Gallery by visiting our website, 934gallery.org. You can also view the exhibition on our website as well from the comfort of your own home. For those of you that are joining us for the very first time today, this is going to be a nice casual conversation with Nicholas about the show, about Nicholas's practice, and I'm going to dig in and ask a few questions too about plastic. I have a lot on my mind. So thank you, Nicholas, for joining us. I want to give you a moment to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your art history, your background in arts, where you went to school, what you studied, and how you ended up here at 934 today.
All right. Well, thanks for having me today. So I guess maybe it's best for me to start back in college. I feel like that's where I started beginning to form a little bit of identity as an artist, or at least, get those first I don't know, ideas of, where I want to go. At the time, in my college days, I was very, very devoted to painting. So much so that when I would take classes, I took all painting classes, but I'd have professors try to be like, hey, you should try out printmaking or something like that. And I would always be like, well, yeah, that sounds nice, but I think I'm going to stick with the painting. Anyways, so I went to school at Otterbein, and there I studied studio art. I got a BA in that, and I did a BA in philosophy there as well. And then at the time, yeah, they didn't have an art history major yet, but they had a minor, so I did art history minor as well. And I was just really into reading and seeing and learning as much about art and art history, the visual world, culture, whether that was through philosophical thought or literature. There was a moment where I thought I was going to double major with art and English, and then went the philosophy route because I realized I sort of liked the theory side of things more. Yeah, so I think another good way to go into my work is, at that time, I thought I was gonna study photography. And the way the degree was set up, or at least for photo concentration, was they wanted you to take digital first. And at that point in my life, I really wasn't interested in digital photography. I really wanted to be working in the darkroom with chemicals and film and paper and everything. So, more with tangible materials.
Right.
So that was I was interested in painting as well. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go take a painting class and see how that goes. And then that kind of provided I guess the creative avenue, or, scratch the itch that I was looking for during that time.
It's you wanted to work with something tactile and something that you could manipulate with your hands in a way that digital photography wasn't providing you.
Yeah, and a lot of painters too, I was still influenced heavily by photography. So a lot of my paintings at that time started with photographs or photo collages. I remember I was doing these portraits that I was into at the time, where I would take people's profile pictures off their not Instagram, but Facebook.
Yeah.
And kind of collage them into these new relationships with people, and then paint pictures of that. And then later I really got into Google Earth and just scanning the planet to see what things looked like from above that. And was using that as a starting point to make paintings that led pretty heavily into abstraction, but there was always that photo reference to begin with.
So you've always had this interest also in philosophy. This doesn't just come about in graduate school for you. You did this in undergrad work as well. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
And then, was it just art philosophy, or was there other types of philosophies that you sort of read about, dabbled in, struck your fancy?
Mostly art philosophy, but as an undergrad, like I got a pretty broad survey. So it was, some was in aesthetics, other was in ethics, or you know, like they had like ancient philosophy. You know, we kind of touched on everything. My senior like thesis in philosophy that was on ethics, actually, not anything art related.
That's awesome. That's really interesting. So at this point, then you go on and you do some graduate school work,
Right.
and you
So
go on
that,
and do your MFA.
yeah, so I went to Stony Brook University to do an MFA, and also I was drawn into them because they also, like the art department there has close ties with the philosophy department, and they offered like this, what they called an advanced graduate certificate in art and philosophy. I think if I had to like sum it up, I would say it's like the graduate school version of getting a minor in something. So it's like a handful of classes that you have to like satisfy, and everything there, or at least philosophy wise, was looking at its relation to art somehow. And in my studio though, I like went in there with like all the intentions of continuing to paint and build on like what I had done. And it was like, I don't know, there's like this anxiety that comes with like starting a graduate program and like your first semester, and you've got like all these new people and new ideas, and the critiques are a little bit more intense than they are when you're an undergrad. So like you start like to question everything about your practice and think like, oh man, like what am I doing? And I think for me, like part of that reaction like was like anytime I like set out to make a painting, I was like, well, what do I make a painting of? Everyone's going to ask like why it's of this versus that. And I'm like, I don't know why, so that started getting really difficult. And I started painting less, but continuing to draw a lot. And I think I liked that, like, or at least working on paper, because it seemed less form, or it was like more informal in a way.
Sure.
Where I could do like lots of them in a day, and then play around with like what's happening. And it just seemed like there was like too much pressure to like commit to canvas and all of that like traditional work.
Canvas does feel very permanent, I think, where drawing and sketching and using even pen or ink or graphite feels very fluid. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the overall trend like was like moving, like there was like some anxiety surrounding like choice and like what to do and make artwork of or about, and then moving away from like paintings on canvas that feel permanent, and really transitioning to, and I've kind of been there ever since, is like works on paper, and these pieces that I produce like rather quickly. Like sometimes like I'll spend maybe like a few weeks on a piece, but I'm not like the labor isn't super intense. It feels a little bit lighter, more casual, and the idea is always like, well, like I'm gonna make like another one when this one's done, so it doesn't matter. Or if like I messed it up, then you just keep going because it's already messed up, and like you can't do any worse. So like you see what can happen to bring it back, and like taking chances that way. I think the other big development from them was like, and this kind of goes with working on paper and working quickly, was I started accumulating like lots of work and noticing, and this is like kind of goes with the 934 show, that like they worked better in these like large groups or clusters of imagery
Yeah.
did as any single image.
So would you say that you're starting to actually go into the idea of installation work at this time a little bit, with the work being shown or needing to be seen with many pieces as a whole? Would you consider that installation versus just like gallery style, hanging your piece up with the markings on the ground exactly spaced apart?
Yeah, definitely. I'm much more drawn to like the installation aspect of like taking like that cluster of work, whatever it is, and it might be, you know, like tightly united to a theme, like the 934 stuff is, you know, like all like a very similar process in all the pieces, and it's all relating to plastic. And, you know, that leads into like environmental and pollution and all those kinds of concerns. Or like the earlier like groups I did were like a little bit looser in their arrangement. And it was, yeah, I don't know. I guess like I was trying to think about them in one way, just like as like there were these like themes that caught my interest, and I was trying to, I guess, figure out for myself, like, why am I drawn to these things? Like, why am I putting this stuff up together?
So what themes have you explored before? I mean, we know cosmology explores this theme of plastics and the sort of history that we are creating for our future selves involving plastics. What other themes have you explored in your work?
One prior to this was I got really for a couple of years obsessed with learning about the Manhattan Project and Dr. Oppenheimer. So like that was like the, you know, World War II like race to create the atomic bomb, and like, you know, they're off in the Southwest, all these scientists from around the world working to build that, and then like they do, and when it happens, a lot of them like immediately regretted it. Like famously, like Oppenheimer, like devoted a lot of the rest of his life to pretty much like lobbying against its use and trying to like rein it in from like all the governments that were producing them, including our own. And, you know, he was, you know, like later like attacked by McCarthy and, you know, kind of like blackballed from certain areas of work after that. So I guess like those, like I'm interested in like that and like plastic, because it's those things that, you know, like we've created, but then spiral like rapidly out of control.
I was going to say that the common theme that I saw between just these two things that you've presented is this idea of humankind creating a larger than intended impact on our future selves, on our future Earth. Would that be appropriate? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's definitely a theme. And I think that like starts like going back, like even in like undergrad days, I had mentioned like getting into like looking at the landscape through Google Earth. I think it like kind of starts with those paintings, where it's looking at, you know, like the way that farmland is like chopped up and gridded, and like the way cities are gridded, and, you know, looking at different like textures and colors between like different, like whether it's like rural farm or a city, or like, you know, like you go like out into like off the grid, like in Alaska, and everything just looks completely different. Like we've got this like preconceived notion that it's like, you know, you drive, you know, outside of Columbus and you get into like the farmland, or like Mansfield, where I'm from, there's lots of, you know, farms and Mohican and stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, like we're out in nature. But it's like, no, we're not.
It's like man-made grids, like from up above, like you just see these carved out spaces. Yeah. Is your interest in that, what do you think came first, your interest in philosophy, and from studying philosophy you became interested in sort of this environmental impact that we're having, or is just this environmental impact purely like just a part of, oh, I'm just exploring this very distantly as a philosopher?
No, I would say, so like philosophy, like I think the way that relates to art is, or for me, is it became like a way of like thinking through like my own process, as well as like looking at other people's work and how it's like made and presented and interacted with, and also just like in my own process, like a way of like how I like ask questions into the work. But yeah, no, I don't think it's like just a philosophical exercise to make work about it. It's because like when you do and you put it out there, and, you know, fortunate to have like exhibitions with it, you get to like, you know, show other people. It's like, hey, like, I think like you should pay attention to this too.
Mhm.
Um, even if it's not saying like anything like, oh, like, um, this is like making moral judgments, like this is good or bad. I think most people, when they look at like the plastic use, they're going to say, yeah, this is bad or this is too much. Um, but it's more of just like saying like focusing someone else's attention onto something that you think is valuable or that like, catches your attention.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what I like about cosmology too, about stepping into the space is, if I was a viewer and just walking in without reading, the artist statement or anything like
Hmm.
that, at first it is just about this sort of beauty too, that exists with material that, once you read and once you think and
Hmm.
once you really start to explore with your head, this is material that is most likely damaging, ourselves, our bodies, our future Earth. But it is also really, really beautiful, and I love that, that sort of duality that exists of like, how can something so destructive and so harmful also just hold so much beauty to it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of striking that way. I guess, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that just comes down to like, formal elements that like in the cosmology images, there's lots of, like fluctuations that like could like, or they do, like they're, like reminiscent of like folded fabric or like drapery of some kind. And like maybe this is a good time to like talk about like how like a lot of those pictures were made.
Yeah.
Um, but so a lot of them, all the images come directly from using plastic shopping bags that we get at local grocery stores, and they're also, I would say, what, like 95% of the pictures, other than a few, are all cyanotypes.
Mhm.
So cyanotype's an old type of like photograph or printmaking, depending on who you ask, and it's a piece of paper that's coated in cyanotype chemicals, which are light sensitive to UV light. Um, so you either need to have an exposure unit, or the cheapest, easiest way is to go outside and use the sun, um, which is what I did for all of mine. And so I'd go outside and I would lay the piece of paper down on the ground. Then on top of the paper is a shopping bag, and layered on top of that a piece of like plexiglass to keep it all sandwiched pretty tight. And then I would let those, depending on like the weather conditions or time of day, like those would expose anywhere from like 10 minutes to maybe 30 minutes. And then you complete it just by removing it from the light source and rinsing it in water for a few minutes and then letting it dry. And then the images, embedded within that paper.
Can you compare that process to, say, a typical darkroom process? I'm going back to, like my days in high school and taking photography and working in a darkroom in high school, and I know that there was a lot of chemicals involved in that sort of darkroom process. Can
Uh-huh.
you talk about like a comparison between the two processes? I'm really interested to know, why you're so drawn to the cyanotype for this cosmology versus, and I know that you do some darkroom imaging in
Uh-huh.
this show as well, but less of it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I guess to answer your second question, I'm drawn to the cyanotype because I really like, I have trouble articulating it, but I really like that, like the ingredients involved with it. So, I'm outside, it's using sunlight, uh, and it's, and the plastic bag. So like, there's something about like the ingredients of like, you've got the cyanotype, this, type of image that relies on UV light, the plastic bag, and then sunlight, and then it's completed with water. I guess there's something about like the just those ingredients involved in it that I really like the combination of,
Yeah.
um, and seems like significant to like its environmental um, themes as well. The um, let's see, going back to the darkroom though. So in darkroom photography, like different than cyanotypes are just completed with washing it in water, and that fixes the image on the paper permanently. When a cyanotype's developing, you can kind of check your exposure carefully. by like looking at it or like removing the object you're have exposing on there, and you can see, you can like get to gauge like the color change that's happening. Like you see the image appearing outside in front of you. In a dark room, you're going to go in and you're going to work with the enlarger that projects, you know, light down onto your photo paper. And then you're not going to see anything on that right away until you put it in the first of 3 baths. And the first one's the developer. And while it's in there, you can see an image, you know, like emerge from the paper. And then once that's complete, you move it over to the stop bath, which stops that process. And then you move it to the last, which would be like the fix. And that, you know, finalizes everything. Then let it rinse in water for a while to get all the chemicals off.
I haven't played around with cyanotype before, but it sounds kind of neat. It's almost alchemical in process, right? You're using these, you're almost making like a something out of magic, essentially, by using like these different components and using the sunlight to expose and then rinsing in water. And it's very, you know, like, I think you're just missing fire. Well, I guess the sun is fire, you know,
Yeah.
it just feels very alchemical in process, but it also feels
Okay.
like slightly more natural. And I'm wondering if that's why you tend to gravitate towards that for the show, and that it feels less harmful, I suppose, in ingredients and in materials.
Maybe part of that feeling is like a lot of, so cyanotypes are really user friendly. And you know, the materials are accessible. You can go to Blick and get like the sensitizer kits. Like all the chemicals are made up. All you have to do is like add water, or there's like other people produce like the paper already, you know, coated for you.
Yeah.
And it's like a good medium for like summer camp exercises where, you know, you go outside and it's like, all right, we're going to collect, you know, like leaves from, you know, like these 4 types of trees. So you go hike through the woods and you find, you know, your samples, and then you get your cyanotype paper out and you expose it, and then you know, wash it in some water. But a lot of cyanotypes, like if you just do like a Google search of it, like you're going to see a ton of them of people using like leaves and flowers and natural materials. So I don't know if that like lends to part of like that, I don't know, like more natural feeling that it has.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. So to me, there's something very painterly about the images that you're producing as well. And I know that you know, started, or you explored your BFA as a painter. There's a couple of pieces in the show where you actually do apply your own hand to them afterwards. Would you consider those more photography, or would you consider that more painting?
I guess I don't know, somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between, yeah.
Yeah. I like that area between. Like Gerhard Richter's like overpainted photographs, or it's, you know, just a little photograph that he's taken somewhere along the way, probably as like a source for a painting, and then it's just kind of like smeared with a single brush stroke or a palette knife with some color, and it kind of
I like that pushing of boundaries. Like as a viewer of art, I like that pushing of boundaries. Like, is it a painting? Is it a photograph? Like, at what point do you draw the line and it's one or the other?
Yeah, it's fun. There's too much like good material and process to like, I feel like, be limited into just like one or the other.
You have a couple of sculptures in the show as well, multiple sculptures in the show. Have you worked in sculpture before, or is this your first time working with sculpture in this volume?
A little bit. Sculptures come about for me, like, I think when I have like a clear idea of what I want to make a sculpture of. And like working with like paper or cyanotype, or you know, like even drawing, like that's more of like something I can do like in my studio, like in downtime, where it's like a process to like generate more ideas. And, you know, like we all like have these like certain like visual tendencies or mediums that we can like gravitate towards. And, you know, you repeat yourself for a while, but eventually that repetition comes up with something new and like a new avenue to like focus on and go down. but the sculpture comes about when I have an idea of something I want to make a sculpture of. So prior to this show, I think like the last sculptures I did were these cast resin ones where I was using resin. The first one was, so I used resin and like I made a mold that was really just like a piece of like aluminum stovepipe that I bought at the hardware store. And I like, so I had like that cylinder mold. I sealed the bottom really tight and then started saving all of my trash and taking it to the studio. And I would toss it down the tube and then pour some resin on top of it. And then let that all, soak and seal through. And then I repeated that until it reached my height. And then, that was the sculpture. It was just this tube of trash. And yeah, so that was one of my earlier sculptures. I put that one on this like funky wooden base that I had found someplace, and titled it Monument One, a self-portrait over time. Just because I was like, I wanted like a little bit of like a joke in it, like, like we're building these like monuments, like out of trash to ourselves. And then like the trash came about, I was reading Don DeLillo's book Underworld, and he's got this section in it where like for a full chapter, like he just talks about like how beautiful this like landfill out in California is, and like starts describing about like how if you could slice into it, you would see like years go by through like the like all the waste. So you'd see like different passing trends, and you would see whatever the material is, like, oh yeah, that was a popular building material in this year. Like there's a bunch of like Game Boys thrown in, or, like stuff like that, would be these, indicators of time passing. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at trash and waste and landfills, and how it's kind of like stacking into these geological layers.
Again, I feel like that there's this sort of theme that I'm noticing in your work, or as we're talking, that's popping up a little bit, and that's a lot of it feels like it would be at home in a natural history museum to some extent. And I love natural history museums. I think that there's an artistry behind how work is presented in them, or how information is presented in them.
Yeah.
Have you spent much time in them? Like, do you get inspiration at all from that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I do think they're interesting, but no, I have not spent tons of time in one. Purely aesthetically though, I am definitely a sucker for like anytime I can walk into a gallery or museum and see like things arranged on tabletops or I guess shelves, like what I use.
Yeah.
And I don't know like why that is, but it's like something about just like the way it like orients the viewer to look at it. Cause I guess like, so like when you see like tabletop stuff, a lot of times it's like some kind of like ephemera related to, like an artist's life or a movement or some exhibits. And I don't know why it is that we choose to like display things that way, like looking down at it flat versus like, putting those in frames just like the artwork on a wall. But yeah, I like that. And maybe the tabletop too lends to it, because it's like, so you said like natural history museums, there's a lot of display like that. There's, the ephemera, like postcards and posters and stuff that people are using from history to talk about a movement. And like, it kind of like adds like, I don't know, I feel like it adds historical weight to it somehow.
Yeah.
And to do that with like my sculptures, I think was what I was going for, because I wanted them to seem kind of like these like artifacts of something, it's like, yes, I made them, but I wanted them to seem like, some of them at least, like they were just these things that have been like found and,
Sure.
Saved and now put on display.
I think that comes across a lot in cosmology, like the idea of these are artifacts of historical significance, in the sense that like it lets us peek into a time. If we were considering ourselves time travelers in this exhibition, it lets us peek into a time before we were able to, like, maybe there's no written documentation anymore, right? And so we're just trying to like see these things that were saved, these things, these fossils, kind of like that you
Yeah.
were talking
Uh-huh.
about in your opening, and seeing the historical significance or how it's impacted nature, right, or
Mhm.
our landscape. And so, yeah, I'm drawn to that a lot, and I think that's really a great way of displaying your work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I like that. Um, I'll probably do it again sometime. I don't know. I'm into it,
I
so.
was going to ask you, yeah. So I know that in the opening you said that, or at least with the cyanotypes with the plastic bags, that you feel like you had maybe exhausted that method
Mhm.
or that medium or that subject matter a little bit. And so, yeah, where do you see kind of you going next, or what kind of work are you looking at creating next if we want to continue this idea of artifacts and if you're going to continue to explore the idea of artifacts and artifacts on display, or creating a sort of history that we can look back on, or this idea of very beautiful destructive things, where do you think
Mhm.
you're going next?
Um, I'm still not entirely sure. I want to do more with like the sculptural side of things. So for all those sculptures, I used a lot of encaustic wax, and that's like a new material to me. So I want to keep working with that and just see where that leads. Like I had mentioned the resin sculpture earlier, and resin's like really, it's got a lot of bad fumes, and it's like kind of nasty stuff to work with.
Yeah.
So I wanted to like switch to something that's like a little easier to be around. And I was like, well, I'll give wax a try. That like encases things. So, like, you get like this airtight seal, and hopefully, whatever's inside, like say like if I put more trash in there, like it's not gonna like rot too much. Um, Although like, I don't know, that could be kind of interesting if you've got like these weird pockets forming inside. Um,
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just
but
thinking also about like slicing them open, like a year later and having that display, right?
yeah. So more with the wax and just seeing like what I can do with it, like whether that's probably like embedding things in it, mixing more stuff with it, and seeing how that goes. Um, the work in the dark room. So there's a few pieces in the show, and that got cut short from COVID. I was really excited about that avenue, and was working in the darkroom at Midwest Photo, and then as soon as like all COVID hit, I that kind of stopped, and then didn't really resume. But fortunately, like I was like pretty strong on the path of uh, the cyanotypes I was doing, so I leaned into that, and then leaned into the sculpture a little bit more.
I what I have two questions. I guess first I want to follow up a little bit on the COVID thing. You mentioned that, and I think it's something I really like to ask artists that we're doing artist talks with, especially since
Mhm.
all of them are distant. We're doing them in the time of COVID.
Yeah.
Um, Talking again about these beautifully destructive things, do you, and I know this is a very like far-reaching, broad question, but like, do you
Mhm.
think that um, what you've experienced in this last year might draw inspiration for work later? This idea of like this destructive virus, or this
Mhm.
even I'm thinking like the plastics and the disposable things that we're creating and leaving behind from this, the reason, like the masks, the one-use masks, or the one-use
Uh-huh.
gloves, and all of these things, like is there a potential to explore that avenue, or is it just too soon to really think about it?
Possibly. It might be too soon. Sometimes like I get nervous about like um I don't know, it's weird to say. I feel like I'm contradicting myself, but I was going to say like I get nervous about creating like works that are tied like really tightly with something like happening in that moment. But like I've made other works that are tied, I guess I just feel like more comfortable if it's in the past a little bit, or you know this like looser ongoing thing. Um,
Right, environmental concerns are nothing new, even though they are
yeah,
at a like a heightened experience for us right now. But it's also nothing
yeah.
new, right? Yeah.
So maybe I do have a piece, well, something new developing that I think comes out of this. So one of my jobs, I work at the Goodwill Art Studio, and we've been doing, since we can't like do like a whole lot of like community engagement with our group of artists, we've been doing mail art projects. So like different just like exchanges where it's like, you know, we've got like members of the community that send us artwork and then we send them artwork back, and sort of like pen pals, but with drawing. So thinking of like that kind of exchange and connecting, I created these, they're still really early, so I haven't like fully, I've got like prototypes, but they're not finished yet. Pieces of paper that I've screen printed basically like a worksheet onto. So if you imagine like a 9x12 piece of paper that's split down vertically, and in the top left and the top right, there's a 4x6 rectangle that is going to be coated in cyanotype on each side. And then below that, it asks for someone to fill in the date, time, location, and notes of making it. So what will happen is, like, at this point, I've done all the screen printing, and I'm going to do the first cyanotype on the left side of it and then fill in my information. And then I'll prepare the right side and send that off to people that want to participate, and then they can complete that and then, you know, fill in the info, and then like that finishes the artwork too. I don't know like what I'll do with them afterwards, you know, if it's just going to be like, if I'll like ask to collect them back for some reason to like try to do something with, or if it'll just be, you know, that's it, it ends there wherever it goes. Yeah, I don't know. But that's the gist of it. I got to figure out the logistics of like connecting and sharing though.
No, I like that. It's also like it's not so much on the nose as like or you know, like let's talk about COVID and masks and stuff like that. It's not as on the nose as that, but it also almost creates like I'm thinking about like Ken Burns' documentary of like reading letters during like the Civil War, like letters back and forth to people. And so I know like when this first started, I did a lot of like writing and communicating with friends via postal service again, and joked around about like, you know, someday somebody's going to find these letters and read them in a Ken Burns documentary. Like, you know, this is the communication. This is what was happening in the time of COVID. And in a way, I could see that being like a historical snippet again too, like especially when you talk about like, you know, time, date, location, you know, what, you know, like of the cyanotype on the piece of paper. That's really cool. I am excited to see where you take that, and I think that's the nice thing, is you don't have to have like a specific direction yet. You can wait for the materials to return to you to decide like what story it ends up telling.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So I guess there was that second, I said I had two questions, and one goes back to your sculptures again that are in the show. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the source material, or like what materials you were sourcing for the sculpture. You mentioned wax. Were there plastics, found objects also in those sculptures?
Yeah, so again, a lot of like the plastic bags that I was using to make the cyanotypes ended up getting melted into the sculptures. I was also just saving a lot of bags that I came across for many months to like, I don't know, like if unique colors or patterns, or I'd like look at things printed on them that, you know, I didn't see, you know, all the time. So I would save those and then use that into the sculpture. Other materials that like I found that seemed, you know, potentially interesting. Also, there's like some paper in it too, which is more of just like recycling old work that like I've been storing but wasn't going to do anything with. And then there's like just stones that I've, you know, found lying around and, you know, on the street and gravel lots, and some slate too that I had. It was like one of those like slate shingles. I don't know where I got it, but I've like carried it around with me for a long time. And so I broke that down and was using it for a few of the pieces.
Kind of not that I'm a practicing artist anymore, but I collect a lot of material that I find interesting, only to store it and move it from house to house to house, right? And so I guess you're finding a way to use those stored materials. would you consider yourself, or would you label yourself as an artist that focuses on recycled or sustainable materials, in the fact that you seem to be, at least with cosmology, you have a very, there is definitely a message there when you walk away from it, of our use of plastics and making us rethink sort of what world we're, creating and what world we're leaving behind for others. And then talking about using these sort of found objects and using plastic bags and using things that, you have stored as materials. Do you want to put that label on yourself as somebody that is an artist that uses, like looks at using recycled materials?
I guess I don't mind, but I don't think I really apply it to myself, because I guess I feel like I use so much like other stuff too,
Hmm.
that are just, traditional materials, and, like single use materials, or things that, have a certain like amount of like waste implied with them, where it's like not just like I'm solely going to work with, recycled materials.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah.
I would find that
I wouldn't,
difficult
I wouldn't add
myself.
it to
Yeah.
myself, but if someone were to describe, my work or aspects of it, I wouldn't be upset, by that either.
Mhm.
Uh,
I find that I would find some difficulty in forcing myself to only use like just materials, found object materials, recycled materials. I'm the kind of
yeah,
person that like would be like, but I really want this one thing, so I'm gonna go
yeah,
out and buy it.
uh-huh. Yeah, it's a hard thing to say. Plus, like, people have been using found materials for so long now. Like, I'm thinking of like Robert Rauschenberg's like paintings and sculptures, and um, I guess like who would probably be like a really like pure environmental artist would be like Andy Goldsworthy.
Ooh, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Have you seen that Rivers and Tides movie about him?
No, I haven't.
Um,
Is it like on Amazon or anything that
I
I can
don't
look
know.
up?
I remember I had to watch it in college, but it's just, it follows him, and it's him walking around where he lives, and he just like basically goes to the beach or out into the woods all day, and then like ends up, creating something out of like icicles, or like, he collects leaves of all these colors and makes some kind of arrangement, or uses sticks, and then, then it's, very temporary too,
I
because
love that. Yeah, the impermanence of it.
shortly after.
That was definitely one of the artists that I learned about in college that kind of stuck with me even all these years later. That it's like, oh yeah, I know that artist. Like, I really
Mhm.
like their work. um, so I'm just gonna kind of come full circle a little bit on this too. You did undergraduate work, and then you went on and you did, and you got your MFA. Did you
Mhm.
feel that going on and going to grad school was a necessary next step for you and your evolution as an artist?
I think it was significant in many ways. And at that time in my life, I was like dead set on it. I really wanted to go. Um, so there would have been like no talking me out of it. I think where I'm at now, with like some like student loan debt that I wish I didn't have, I would have probably like just like hit the brakes a little bit, and like lived and worked and continued making um, art in my studio at home. And like I think I would have eventually gone, but maybe like waiting, like, because I had like 1 year, I graduated college, had 1 year off, and then went. So I think like I could see value in waiting a couple more years. Um, but also I knew I wanted to one day like try to, work at a university teaching. So, that's a necessary step that you have to do. So, um, yeah, so I would have to at some point.
Yeah. Do you think you would have, like you talked about the beginning of grad school and kind of getting pushed out of your, uh, I guess your comfort zone a little bit, or getting pushed out of, and questioning the work that you were making, like, why am I,
Mhm.
if I'm going to do this painting, like, why am I doing this painting? Do you think that you would have come to that um, conclusion, or not conclusion, but do you think you would have come to that point in evolution in your artistic practice if it hadn't been for grad school?
I think in certain ways, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would have just happened slower. Um, where like I feel like what grad school is really good at, and like it can be really disorienting at times too, but it's like it like takes your progress and or like your practice and looks at it from so many angles that, you know, either it can like kind of like bump you ahead like to the next phase a little faster, or I guess the downside too would be hopefully you pull through like with that like enough like that like sense of identity of like who you are as an artist and like what you want to achieve. But I feel like it can also kind of hurt some people too, where they like just, you know, lose all their guidance and are like too like weighted down with questions and not enough answers to keep going.
Yeah, sounds like something that each individual artist kind of has to explore for themselves as to whether or not that's the moment in time that they want to go, or if they even need to go. But it seems like it's
yeah, and I wouldn't say that it's necessary for everybody. It depends, like if you just want to be in like, not just, but like if you want to be an artist and you're not interested in like trying to pursue like a career as like a professor any time, then I would say, you know, definitely just spend a lot of time working, and, you know, build, you know, community, and, you know, get those like circles of like other artists that you're close with that you can like, you know, ask for like honest criticism from, and do that, and then decide if you want to like, you know, push it to like another level and go, or yeah, I don't know. It's,
well, that's good
you gotta weigh
advice.
your motivations for it.
Yeah, that's good advice. I know that there's a number of artists that watch these artist talks that might be a little bit younger in their career, that probably what you just said was really helpful to them. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I was dead set on it though, so like nothing was gonna like stop me from that. I was like, yeah, I'll sign these papers if you're gonna give me the money to go.
Yeah. In that moment, you know, that was the right decision for you, and it took you to where you are now. So
Yeah,
I'm one of those like no regrets kind of person.
yeah, I wish I didn't have the student loan debt, but I definitely don't regret the experience.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Mhm.
So one of the things I always like to wrap up and chat about with our artists is just a big, you know, fantasy question, and that is, you know, no holds bar. Like, you have unlimited resources, unlimited money, unlimited space. Like,
Mhm.
right now, what would be the dream exhibition for you to create?
Um, that's a tough question, actually.
It's like a real tough pressure question. People that tend to go either with like scale, like they're like, oh yeah, like I'd do something so massive and so huge, or it'd be like I'd use a material I've never been able to get my hands
Uh-huh.
on, or something like that.
All right, so I guess I'm gonna go with the direction of scale, and like try like doing like some kind of land art,
Okay.
like go back to like, you know, like 1970s earthworks, and try to, I don't know, do something that would continue in that vein.
Permanent or impermanence? Like, would the end exhibition, or would the end result be uh, the documentation of that piece of work, or would the work
Mhm.
then stay there permanently forever?
Um, I guess it would
This work
stay
that you've
there,
never
but
thought
like,
about before I just asked you
yeah,
this question.
I'm thinking, so it would definitely need documentation, because probably remote, or at least not accessible to like many people physically.
Sure.
And then as for the permanence, I would want to find like a material or like resource that I could like work with there that like wouldn't do additional harm to the environment on being there, but would you know, like it would, you know, maybe like look nice at first and then a little less nice after a year, and then just slowly, you know, disappear.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I want to
So
see that.
no maintenance to it after it's whatever it is.
Well, thank you for playing along with me on that one. I always like to like put people kind of on the spot and just think about, you know, like unlimited time, whatever it is, unlimited everything. Like, what would you do? So thanks for playing around with me. I want to thank you again for joining me today for this artist talk. Is there any thing that we did not cover that you would like to mention and talk about?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, I really
Yeah,
thank you for
I feel
letting
like we
me.
covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We really did. You let me pick your brain, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope it's coherent and not too rambling.
That's what editing's for, right? That's what we'll put that on our editors. So thank you again for our audience for sticking with us this today and giving a listen to Nicholas and I chat about the exhibition Cosmology and Nicholas's work and exploration in art and material. If you enjoyed today's artist talk, be sure to visit 934gallery.org. You can make a donation on that site. We are a 100% volunteer-run art space in Columbus, Ohio. So that means none of us get paid to do any of this stuff, and any donations that come in go straight to making sure that we can have artists like Nicholas exhibit work in our space. Again, if you enjoyed today's talk and you want to see Nicholas's work, you can join us at 934gallery.org and make an appointment to see the show Cosmology, which will be up through November 14th. So thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you.